Hi everyone, I'm Mousumi Ghosh, a PhD graduate from Interdisciplinary Program in Climate Studies in Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. During my PhD, I have worked towards flood management for an urban coastal catchment and its implications on near real-time risk forecasting and mapping. The IPCC 6th assessment report states that the average annual precipitation amount in a day, as well as the daily mean precipitation intensities, have increased since the mid 20th century, resulting in increase in intensity and frequency of heavy flooding events. Floods have become a major topic of worldwide concern for the last few decades and have the greatest damage potential of all natural disasters and affect the largest number of people physically, economically, as well as emotionally. Flood inundation mapping and forecasting ahead of an event play a crucial role in managerial decisions and timely evacuation during the time of floods. However, advances in flood risk forecasting based on precipitation forecast, topography, and socioeconomic aspects of a region to prioritize emergency response measures beyond the current state of art are yet to be explored. Floods, as we know, is the temporary covering of land by water as a result of heavy precipitation. The urban population is at a greater risk to damages caused by the flood. Lack of proper drainage system coupled with low permeable catchments cause excessive runoff during heavy rainfall which result in floods. The climate change and human-induced land cover changes have further contributed in urban flooding. The structural measures of flood control, like flood conveyance and the flood defense system, provide long term solutions requiring large investments, while the non structural measures, such as flood warning systems, evacuation planning, and coordinated recovery procedures, help protect towns and cities already situated in high risk areas. Flood modeling plays an integral part in flood risk assessment and floodplain management. They help us to interpret, assess, and predict the characteristics of flood events like flood depth, velocity, areal extent, etc. These information help the authorities in land use planning identify the appropriate evacuation routes and provide maximum protection to the population by establishment of emergency centers. They are primarily grouped into empirical methods, hydrodynamic models, and simplified conceptual models. Hydrodynamic models are mathematical tools which are governed by the laws of physics to describe or replicate the motion of fluid. Equations are established between various hydrological variables such as depth, pressure, velocity, based on conservation of mass, energy, and momentum. They are typically grouped into one-dimensional, two-dimensional, and three-dimensional models based on the spatial illustration of floodplain flows. An efficient approach for floodplain modeling would be to link these models, such as 1D model can be used to when the flow depths are well defined, and 2D models are used for representation of extended areas. The coupled models approach saves computation time as well. Usually, mass conservation equation is used to link the 1D 2D flows. So, with this context, in the work towards my PhD thesis, I have attempted to develop a set of novel frameworks for flood risk forecasting and mapping for urban coastal catchment by utilizing both structural as well as non-structural measures of flood management. Flood inundation maps are generated by translation of flood depth and flood extent obtained to identify the potential areas at risk, while flood hazard maps represent various characteristics of the flood flow. These frameworks are attempted over Mumbai, a coastal megacity in India. Mumbai is one of the major flood-prone cities in India that is subjected to heavy flooding almost every year. The infamous events of 2005 and 17 are a testimonial to this. The situation is further worsened by high spatiotemporal variability of rainfall, inadequate drainage systems, and large unplanned settlements. So for these studies, a three-way coupled hydrodynamic flood modeling framework is developed by coupling Mike 1-1 model, which accounts for stream flow along with the drainage network, with the Mike 2-1 model, which accounts for the overland flow in Mike flood platform for flood inundation and hazard mapping. The proposed approaches have been applied over Mumbai, a flood-prone catchment in Mumbai, which is a very complex study area due to which is subject to steep change in slope over a small stretch, tidal influence, as well as high spatiotemporal variability of rainfall. The observed rainfall, designed rainfall, and forecasted rainfall through statistical and dynamic approaches are provided as an input to the comprehensive flood modeling framework to derive observed flood hazard maps, design hazard maps, and forecasted hazard maps for various contributions chapters contributing studies of my PhD. The socioeconomic vulnerability is evaluated by considering relevant socioeconomic indicators in a multivariate framework which includes principal component analysis followed by data envelopment analysis to derive the socioeconomic vulnerability maps. Finally, the flood risk maps are quantified by combining the flood hazard component as well as the socioeconomic vulnerability component while giving them equal importance. So one of the contributing chapters aims to develop a novel rationalization framework to record multiple hydrometeorological variables and acquire maximum information at an optimal cost. Multivariate statistical analysis followed by multi-attribute decision-making technique is performed in this study to rank the existing weather monitoring stations in Mumbai based on their ability to capture the spatiotemporal variability of rainfall and relative humidity of the region. A comprehensive validation of this framework is also performed at the flood inundation and hazard level. So for my next study, a novel comprehensive hydrodynamic flood modeling framework is proposed for the study area by adapting different inland hydraulic scenarios that may aid to reduce the inundation extent. A set of hydraulic scenarios for the river channel, which consists of a combination of different cross-section and different lining materials, are incorporated into the three-way coupled hydrodynamic flood modeling framework developed for the Methi River catchment to derive flood inundation and hazard maps for various return periods of rainfall, discharge, and tidal elevation. The trapezoidal cross section lined with concrete was found to be the best possible scenario for flood control adaptation strategy based on the reduction of very severe and moderately severe flooded cells in inundation and hazard maps when compared with the maps of the original scenario. This is a generic framework and can be employed over other flood prone areas as well. So the accuracy in rainfall and full flood forecasting is the need of the hour to develop a proficient flood forecasting and early warning system to reduce the overall vulnerability and risk. Therefore, the hydrodynamic flood modeling framework has been further utilized for near real-time risk forecasting with rainfall obtained from statistical and physics-based approach. A regional weather forecast model established with a quantile regression based statistical method is utilized to acquire the rainfall forecast at various quantiles. The hazard forecasted maps derived from different quantiles of rainfall along with the socioeconomic vulnerability map are utilized to derive the response priority maps prior to a flood events. Simultaneously, a physics-based numerical weather prediction model, which is a weather research forecasting model, is implemented to forecast the fine resolution rainfall and consequently the flood hazard maps under various urban canopy scenarios, which are WARF model not coupled with urban canopy model, WARF model coupled with single layer canopy model, and the third is WARF coupled with multi-layer urban canopy model. In comparison to the maps derived using observed rainfall data, the WARF model coupled with MUCM, that is the multi-layer urban canopy model, provides the closest results. The proposed approach can be highly beneficial for improved and early forecast and hence can facilitate the civic bodies to prioritize the various regions for decision-making purposes during the time of flooding events. Thank you.